I'm Kaylee for caffieri.com. Today, I have a tale of strangers selflessly sharing cramped accommodations. And if you're sitting or lying down comfortably, let's begin. Cupboard love. When Logan Shipley was paired off with Rebecca Davies, he was bitterly disappointed. He didn't really want to be at this summer camp at all, but his father wasn't well, and Shipley Sr. wanted poor Logan to represent their church. Rebecca was 18, the same age as her reluctant partner, but a real holy roller. Butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. Far too sinful. Logan, on the other hand, wasn't really a religious person, but he'd been dragged to his parents' somewhat extremist congregation every Sunday since birth. He'd also been enrolled in so many church programs it made his head spin. On the bright side, the good son was off to college in the fall, and this would likely be his last camp. This unlikely pairing had been thrown together for a treasure hunt. A large sword, referred to as Solomon's saber, had been hidden somewhere outside the camp, and it was a test of teamwork to find it. Even though the radio was screaming about an escaped convict being in the vicinity, the camp leader was convinced the Lord would protect his little flock. On the word, "Go!" most of the couples charged into the valley behind the capped gooseneck hut, but Logan thought it was most likely to be hidden in the thick bush on the east side. It took some persuading to get Rebecca to go along with his hunch, but eventually she gave in. Once in the tangly brambles, he wasn't so convinced about his theory. Their path became arduous and scratchy, and it had not improved his partner's mood. However, after a few minutes, they came upon a small cabin. He thought this would have been the ideal place to conceal a faux sacred artifact, and opened the door. The place seemed empty, except for a large cupboard at one end. Bingo! Or so they thought. When the triumphant couple raced over to the battered piece of furniture and opened its doors, they received an almighty shock. Right before their terrified eyes was a gaunt-looking man with a huge scar on his face and a big sword pointing right at Logan's throat. Rebecca was about to become hysterical, but the man said if she wasn't quiet, he'd shove the sharp weaponry right through Logan's gizzard. Calm was definitely called for. He lunged out of the cupboard, herded them into a corner, and demanded that Logan take off his clothes. "I don't think they'll fit you," he suggested meekly. The last thing Logan wanted to do, beside getting disemboweled by an escaped convict, was strip off in front of Rebecca. "I don't want to wear them," growled the man. "It'll just slow you down if you get lucky enough to escape. I want to get a good head start, see? So take your fucking clothes off." Logan was still reluctant to shed his gear, particularly his underwear, but with a sword poised to kill him on the spot, he complied. The still whimpering Rebecca kindly turned her back. He folded his churchly duds up with his shoes on top and surrendered the bundle as demanded. "Now yours," the man snarled at Rebecca. "Please don't make me do that," she pleaded. "My pastor says no man shall see me naked until I'm married." "Fuck your pastor," said the man. "Now strip. I'll cut the balls off your boyfriend here." "Oh, he's not my boyfriend," Rebecca replied hoarsely. The man put the sword right next to Logan's testicles. "Look at him. Now get your fucking clothes off or this floor is going to be covered in blood." Logan was petrified that Rebecca would prefer his castration to being seen naked, but she did eventually agree, and she did eventually take her blouse off. And then she eventually took her shoe off. She was just about to eventually take the other shoe off when the man slapped her across the ass with the flat of his sword. This sped up the proceedings considerably. Once he was in possession of the two bundles, before Logan could even get a good look at Rebecca's rather fetching naughty parts, the man ordered them both to get in the cupboard. Despite weeping uncontrollably, she cautiously ventured inside the gnarled wooden structure, mostly to spare herself the embarrassment of standing out in the open, naked. When Logan followed her, she was absolutely scandalized. Surely the most hardened criminals would not be so as inhumane as to force two completely naked, unmarried people of the opposite sex into the same cupboard. However, it wasn't until the ancient door slammed behind them that she really began to panic. The man tapped on the splintery wood after he secured the latch. "Have a fucking good time in there," he chortled, and scurried off, sticking the ceremonial sword in the ground outside the hut. Rebecca was sniffling, which made it nary impossible for Logan to hear if the man had indeed gone. Being the hero was really tough to do under these difficult conditions. After a few minutes, he thought, what the hell, and tried to break through the door. There wasn't enough room to do much except throw himself against the ancient oak. Ow! The door stood solid and his shoulder hurt. On the upside, he did accidentally brush his arm across Rebecca's breast in the process. "What are you doing?" she whined. "I'm attempting to get us out of here," he replied, trying once more. Once again, he brushed across her ample chest offerings. She was not amused. "Look, I can't help it," snapped Logan. "We need to get out of here. If you're so worried about me touching your tits, then you have a go at the door." Rebecca ordered him not to be so vulgar and took up his challenge. Alas, her delicate shoulders were designed for far less arduous tasks. Before Rebecca had even reached the wood, she lost her balance and fell, tits first, against Logan's chest. He put his meaty arms around her in an effort to save her from falling. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed as she scrambled to free herself. Logan was starting to get impatient with her irrational behavior, but not with her breasts. He told her to shut up and let him think. Perhaps he'd softened up the cupboard's hinges with his last shoulder-crushing charge. Ow! No, he hadn't. No, he hadn't. Rebecca started to sob again. "They'll probably send out a search party from the camp, won't they?" "They will," he replied. "Eventually. And they'll find us both naked together," she sobbed even louder. "So what? At least we'll be rescued." "But they'll undoubtedly think certain unsavory things and it will get back to my pastor." "If you're saying they'll think I shupped you, I'll explain that you're the very last person I'd ever want to fuck." Rebecca went strangely silent. "You don't find me attractive?" she whispered with a quiver in her voice. "You are attractive," he tried to console her. "I just meant you're not my type." I guess you've been intimate with other girls." "A couple of girls." "Were they much more attractive than me?" "No, but I obviously liked them." "And you don't like me?" I didn't say I didn't like you. It's just that you're so prudish. I doubt if you could ever give a man a good time. Sexually, that is." "Don't you think it's a sin to have sex before you're married?" "Guys wouldn't grow a dick until they were in their 20s if that was true," Logan retorted. He really didn't want to continue this line of conversation. The next thing he felt was Rebecca's hand fondling his penis. "What are you doing?" he inquired. "I'm showing you that I could please a man if I wanted to." Logan could feel his cock getting harder and harder as she put both of her soft, warm hands to work. "How does that feel?" she asked. "It feels great," he stammered. "Really great." She continued to work his foreskin backwards and forwards till his sperm were banging their fists on the inside of his nuts to be let out. "Now, how would you please me?" she sighed sexually. "That is, if you really, really wanted to." Logan really, really wanted to. He blissfully slithered down Rebecca's untouched frame until he reached her magnificent boobage. There he paused to gloriously dine upon nipples that stood out like red, ripe cherries. She didn't quite know what to do with her hands as her memory's modesty was being so joyously violated. In the end, she just dug her nails into his shoulders as towering, tingly waves of yum rose up from her chest and flooded her brain. Diving ever lower, the intrepid Logan squeezed himself down to his knees. Before him laid her unplowed garden of ecstasy. He pulled her thighs gently apart to feast upon her womanhood and finger her buttery interior. Rebecca started to whimper, but this time it was not from fear. Logan mercilessly licked her inner lips and clit until her whole body shook, rattling the cupboard and making it difficult to keep his tongue tucked deep inside her. Within minutes, her upper leg muscles tightened almost to the point of snapping. Rebecca's grip on his head became almost painful. Her breathing became strained. "Motherfucker!" she screamed as a vicious, violent orgasm consumed her. Logan's nose was practically driven up into his forehead as his locked-up lover's pelvis ground repeatedly into his face to squeeze every last atom of delicious sensation out of her climax. Once things had died down somewhat, Logan struggled to his feet. He had planned to have another go at her tits, but now it was her turn to licky his sticky. Her mouth engulfed him hungrily, and she sucked on his cock like it was made out of molten chocolate cake. Rebecca seized his buttocks tightly in her hands and kept sucking and sucking. He wanted to cry out stop as he could feel the cum rising within him, but he just didn't have the willpower. As he approached his release, the once prudish princess stuck one finger up his ass while raking his scrotum with her nails. Logan blew a gigantic load that threatened to drown her. Gamely, she swallowed and pumped his bra till every last drop of his creamy emission was tickling down her throat. Far from being satisfied by the schism with his jism, Logan longed to dwell in her well. He grabbed Rebecca hard and kissed her passionately for several minutes. By the time he'd finished his oscillatory assault, his dick was hard again and ready for a vaginal visitation. His task was far from easy, standing up in a cramped cupboard, but he was more than willing to persevere. Logan knew she was feeling receptive because the inside of her cunt felt like a well-oiled velvet. He slid his rod up to the very hilt, savoring every millimeter of penetration. Grabbing her forearms for support and leverage, he started to rock her backwards and forwards on his pecker. He'd never done the dirty deed vertically before, but he was liking it. Liking it a lot. His pace got faster and faster until he could feel himself on the verge of a second colossal ejaculation. Rebecca was practically rabid as she stabbed her nails into his back, screaming as though her womb was about to explode. The overwhelming spasms from their mutual climax rampaged throughout their bodies. Strong forces far beyond their control impelled unbridled bestial gyrations that almost smashed their cupboard prison to pieces. After the once raging sexual waters had been stilled, Logan removed his still throbbing cock from her sodden and satiated snatch and leaned back. Yikes! There were voices outside their diminutive domicile. The cupboard door swung open to reveal a shocked and titillated camp leader. Goodness me, what have you two been doing? Rebecca, seemingly transformed by the experience, told him to fuck off, and she and Logan walked back to the camp totally naked, holding hands. All of the students, rather than shouting out, "Sinners!" as they walked past, began to cheer. In fact, the whole atmosphere of the gathering changed for the remaining few days. The camp leader stayed in his room most of the time and was rarely seen. The rumor was that he had a stack of pornographic DVDs and a lady hand puppet in there. The end. Wasn't that a 5-star hotel of a story, boys and girls? I know it popped my champagne cork. If you found it as pleasing as I did, please don't be afraid to like, subscribe to our channel, or leave a comment. And if you'd like to read more stories like this, please check out Cristiano's books on Amazon.com by clicking the link below. See you next time!